3 soldiers in full ceremonial dress, scarlet tunics, steel breastplates, and polished boots stood at attention beside a tiny white coffin. Then, as the wind held its breath, they saluted. For 60 seconds, not a quick gesture, not symbolic, but a soldier's goodbye to a 10-year-old girl who had become one of their own. And when the final prayer was spoken, they lowered their hands, turned in perfect formation, and walked away. No cameras, no headlines, just duty fulfilled. But how did we get here? What happened in that hospital room weeks earlier to make the British Household Division abandon protocol and show up like knights in a child's fairy tale? It started with a whisper. "Mom, do you think the Royal Guards ever come to hospitals?" Her name was Isla Bennett, and she wasn't asking for a miracle. She was asking for a memory, a moment, a reason to believe just once more that magic could be real. Diagnosed with terminal osteosarcoma, Isla had stopped dreaming of tomorrow. But she still believed in red coats, tall black hats, and silent guardians who protected queens. And maybe, just maybe, people like her. Her father wrote a letter. Her nurse forwarded it. And somehow, against all odds, it reached a briefing room. Deep inside Windsor HQ, the soldiers didn't know what to do. They guarded castles, hosted kings, buried prime ministers. But none of that prepared them for a little girl who asked for nothing but their presence. Captain Ilara Wynne said it best. She didn't write to a charity. She wrote to us. So we go. No cameras. No questions. We show up. And they did. No fanfare. No press. They walked through sterile hospital corridors like they were stepping onto parade grounds, because for Isla, this was the most important procession of all. They saluted her. They pinned a crest on her gown. They gave her a photo of Titan, the cavalry horse. And they left behind a tiny, hand-stitched guardsman to watch over her, even after they were gone. Weeks later, Isla would whisper her last words to her mother. "Do you think they'll know I'm gone?" And they did, because some soldiers protect more than palaces. Sometimes they protect hearts. Sometimes they salute one final time and never speak of it again, but they remember. And somewhere in Windsor, her letter hangs framed in the guardroom, right next to medals of valor, because Isla Bennett reminded the Royal Guards why they stand still and who they're really standing for. Welcome to Tales and Truths, where quiet moments echo the loudest truths. Here, we don't just tell stories. We honor them, like the day a dying child asked if Royal Guards could visit a hospital. And soldiers in red coats answered with silence, ceremony, and a salute that changed everything. These are the stories of people who showed up, not for cameras, but for each other, of uniforms that meant more than tradition, of kindness that broke the rules and made them better. If you believe in compassion, quiet courage, and that sometimes fairy tales become real, you're exactly where you belong. Subscribe. Stay with us and discover stories that don't just move you. They stand for something. This is Tales and Truths, where the smallest voices leave the deepest marks. The pediatric oncology ward at St. Anne's Children's Hospital didn't smell like hope. It smelled like alcohol wipes, plastic tubing, and silence. Room 313 had been Isla Bennett's world for the past 3 weeks. 10 years old, sharp as a tack and far too familiar with the beeping of machines most children never have to hear. Outside her window, she could just barely see the treetops of Kensington Gardens. And every morning, like clockwork, she would watch the same gray-suited people hurry past, eyes glued to their phones, while horses from the mounted police trotted by in the early fog. In her mind, they weren't officers or tourists. They were Royal Cavalry, preparing for a parade only she could see. Isla had osteosarcoma, advanced and unrelenting. The doctors no longer spoke of recovery, just comfort, pain management, and moments of peace. But Isla knew. Children always know. She didn't cry, not in front of the nurses, not in front of her parents. She was saving her tears for something else. Her father, David, read to her every night from The Secret of the Iron Knight, a story about a soldier who stood guard for a sleeping kingdom, never blinking, never failing. Isla loved that book. She said it helped her remember what bravery looked like. Her mother, Rachel, mostly stood at the window, watching the sky. She rarely spoke during these hours, but when she did, it was always to Isla gently, lovingly, like a lighthouse whispering. Through a storm. And then one evening, Isla turned her head toward her mom, her voice thin but focused. "Mom, do you think the Royal Guards ever come to hospitals?" Rachel blinked, startled. "Royal Guards?" "The ones in the red coats." "At the palace. I saw them once when I was little. They looked like real-life fairy tale people." David smiled. Weakly, "They're very busy, honey. They protect important places." "I know," Isla said, her voice soft. "But maybe they protect people too." The nurse on duty that night, Maya Lennox, paused while checking Isla's for something. In her posture shifted. "You know," she said gently, "sometimes when you ask for something impossible, impossible things happen." Isla's eyes lit up with a glimmer that hadn't been there in weeks. That night, when Isla had drifted to sleep with her favorite plush rabbit tucked under one arm, David sat alone in the family lounge. In front of him lay a blank page from the hospital's stationery drawer. He'd never written a letter like this. He didn't know how to start. What do you say when your daughter is dying, and the only thing she wants is to believe in magic? One last time? With trembling hands he began to write, "Dear Household Division." The letter wasn't long, barely a page and a half, but every word carried weight. David folded it carefully, addressed it to the Household Division, Windsor Guard Headquarters, and handed it to Rachel with a sigh. "This feels pointless," he said quietly. Rachel sealed the envelope anyway. Hope usually does. What they didn't know was that Maya Lennox, the night nurse, had already taken a photo of the letter. She emailed it to her nephew, Private Lennox, stationed at a base outside Aldershot, with a message that simply read, "If this lands on the right desk, maybe it could matter." 3 days later, that email made its way through a chain of silent approvals, shared glances, and whispered questions to a beige briefing room deep inside Windsor HQ. The walls were bare. The lighting was harsh, and the people seated at the long table weren't the type to get emotional. But as Captain Alara Wynne read the letter aloud, something shifted. Isla's words, her belief in fairy tales, her bravery, her simple wish, hit harder than anyone expected. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And somehow that made it worse. When she finished reading, the room was silent. Guardsman Reese Calder sat at the far end of the table. 15 years in service. 2 deployments. Not a man known for reacting. But even he cleared his throat before speaking. "How many letters like this do we even get?" "4 this year," someone answered. "Then we can handle this one." Calder replied. Trooper Mason Gray, cavalry unit, leaned forward. "My niece is 10. I can't imagine her asking for anything simpler or more impossible." Captain Wynne tapped the letter against the table, thinking. She didn't write to a charity. She didn't ask for celebrities or toys. She wrote to us. That's not a PR stunt. That's belief. A long pause. Then she said, "We go." "But how?" Someone asked. "Not with cameras," she said. "Not with news crews. We go like we would for a visiting dignitary. Full ceremonial dress. No fanfare. No explanation. We show up because to her, we are the fairy tale. And fairy tales show up when they're needed most." They began to plan. Captain Wynne would lead the visit. Calder would wear full foot guard uniform, scarlet tunic, bearskin hat, gloves white as snow. Gray would bring his cavalry breastplate, polished until it caught sunlight like fire. A quiet, our MP escort would handle logistics. There would be no press releases, no statements. Just soldiers, honoring a promise Before they left the room, Wynne asked one last question. "When we see her, do we salute?" Everyone looked at each other. It was Calder who answered, "Yes, we do." It was a gray Thursday morning. London rain drizzled, like it had forgotten how to stop. Inside room 313, Isla Bennett slept under a knitted quilt her grandmother made, surrounded by 4 poles and soft beeping machines. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Her parents had stepped out for 10 minutes, just long enough to get coffee and breathe outside the fluorescent air. No one knew what was coming. At exactly 11:54 a.m., 3 unmarked black Land Rovers turned the corner and pulled up to the entrance of St. Anne's Children's Hospital. No sirens, no flashing lights. They didn't need them. Their presence was loud enough in silence. When the doors opened, time seemed to pause. Guardsman Reese Calder stepped out first, towering, solemn, wrapped in scarlet. His bearskin hat brushed the doorframe, his gloves perfect, his expression unreadable. Behind him, Trooper Mason Gray emerged, helmet tucked under one arm, his silver breastplate gleaming even through London's mist. He looked less like a soldier, and more like something pulled from a painting. Then came Captain Ilara Wynne, her service dress pristine, her posture radiating command. No fanfare, no smile. Just quiet purpose. A woman walking her dog froze in place. A bus driver slowed to a crawl. A little boy in a Spider-Man hoodie stood motionless, mouth open. But the soldiers didn't look at them. Their eyes were ahead. Their mission was above the crowd. 3 floors up in a room filled with machines and a girl who still believed in fairy tales. Inside the hospital, the effect was immediate. Conversations stopped. Nurses looked up mid-step. Even the janitor with headphones in paused his mop to stare. They moved through the halls like they belonged not as visitors, but as something ceremonial, something sacred. Children peeked from their doors. One boy whispered, "Are they real?" Another clutched a toy sword tighter to his chest, like he was saluting. The team reached the pediatric wing, where head nurse Janine waited. Wide-eyed, "They're in room 313, she whispered. "Her parents, they don't know you're coming." "Good," Wynne said softly. Some surprises should stay magical. As they approached the door, a hush fell over the hallway. Captain Wynne knocked softly, professionally. The kind of knock that asks permission, not demands entry. Inside, Isla stirred. She turned her head slowly and stopped. There, in her doorway, stood a soldier in scarlet red, glowing against the sterile white of her hospital room. A cavalryman stood behind him, eyes kind beneath the gleam of steel, and a woman in uniform held something in her hand. A box, a letter, a promise. Isla's voice cracked as she whispered, "You came." Calder stepped forward. He raised a gloved hand in a slow, deliberate salute. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence said everything. This wasn't a photo op. This was honor. And Isla, at that moment, was the most important person in the world. For a moment, no one moved. Isla stared at the 3 figures in her doorway, eyes wide, barely blinking. She wasn't sure if it was real, if she was still dreaming, or if the medicine had made her see things. But then Guardsman Calder stepped inside, and the weight of his footsteps made the floor tremble. Just slightly. Real behind him. Trooper Gray gave a quiet nod, like he was entering a sacred space. And Captain Ilara Wynne came last, carrying a small velvet box with both hands, as if it were a royal jewel. Isla's fingers clutched her blanket. Her voice was a whisper, full of disbelief. "You're really here?" Calder didn't answer right away. Instead, he raised his hand to his forehead and gave her a perfect salute, slow, formal, held for a full 3 seconds. Then he lowered it with the kind of precision that said this wasn't for show. This was for her. Captain Wynne knelt beside the bed. "Miss Isla Bennett," she said, her voice firm but kind. "On behalf of Her Majesty's Household Division, we have something for you." She opened the velvet box. Inside, nestled in navy blue fabric, was a silver pin, shaped like the household crest. Real, official, not a toy, not a replica. Isla's breath caught. For your courage, Wynne continued, and your extraordinary heart, we'd like to offer you honorary protection, as one of our own. Her hands shook as she nodded. Wynne gently pinned the crest to Isla's hospital gown, just above her heart. From the foot of the bed, Trooper Gray stepped forward, holding something behind his back. I brought someone too, he said with a grin. This is Titan, my horse. Big softy. Terrified of squirrels. He handed Isla a photograph of a towering black horse with intelligent eyes. He said he's honored to serve beside you. Isla giggled, a bright sound that hadn't echoed through that room in weeks. Then came the final gift. Captain. Wynne placed a framed photograph on the nightstand. An aerial shot of the changing of the guard, with a handwritten note at the bottom. To Isla, from all of us who march every morning. From now on, we're marching for you. Isla blinked fast, her voice trembling. Am I really that important? Calder answered without hesitation. You're the most important person in London today. The room didn't feel like a hospital anymore. It felt like a cathedral, like a sacred place where the world slowed down to honor someone who never asked to be honored, but deeply deserved it. Isla reached out, touched the wool sleeve of Calder's tunic, then gently placed her hand in his. You're not a story, she whispered. You're real. Calder smiled, eyes soft beneath the brim of his bearskin. So are you, he said, and you're one of us now. Isla passed away quietly on a Tuesday morning. The machine still beeped. The air still smelled of antiseptic. But in that moment, something sacred happened. She was holding her mother's hand, and in her other arm, she clutched the tiny, hand-stitched toy guardsman the soldiers had sent just days before, a perfect replica in red wool and felt, down to the miniature rifle and black bearskin hat. Her final words were soft, barely audible. Do you think they'll know I'm gone? Rachel didn't hesitate. She bent low, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered, They'll know. They did. The funeral was meant to be small. Just family, a few classmates, her favorite teacher, Maya the night nurse. A quiet affair under gray skies at a country cemetery nestled between old trees and time-worn stones. But just as the service was about to begin, 1:59 p.m., 1 minute. Before the first prayer, 3 figures appeared at the edge of the path. They didn't speak. They didn't ask permission. They didn't need to. Guardsman Reese Calder, in full ceremonial dress, his scarlet tunic immaculate, his boots polished to a mirror shine. Trooper Mason Gray, in formal cavalry uniform, his breastplate gleaming beneath. The Clouds. Captain Alara Wynne, standing tall in her dark service uniform, eyes forward, expression unreadable but reverent. They stopped at a respectful distance, facing Isla's tiny white coffin. As the priest began the prayer, the 3 soldiers raised their right hands in a slow, synchronized salute. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't symbolic. It was a soldier's farewell. A full minute passed. No one dared move. David gripped Rachel's hand until his knuckles went white. The priest's voice cracked. Even the wind seemed to hold still when the final words were said and the first shovelfuls of earth touched the casket. The salute dropped, and the 3 guards turned in perfect formation and walked away, silent as shadow. No explanation. No goodbye. Just duty. Fulfilled. 3 weeks later, while sorting through Isla's belongings, Rachel found an envelope tucked inside the pages of The Secret of the Iron Knight. It was addressed, in Isla's uneven handwriting, to the guards who came for me. Inside was a note, simple and full of love. Thank you for making me feel like someone who mattered. You protect the Queen, but you made me feel like a queen. 2. I'm not scared anymore. If you ever need someone brave, I'll be watching. Isla Bennett, Honorary Guard. At the bottom was a drawing stick, figures in red and black. 3 guards standing beside a little girl with curly hair and the biggest smile. That letter now hangs in the guardroom at Windsor HQ, framed in glass, beside medals of valor. And every morning, as the guards march out for duty, they pass beneath it. Some touch their hats, others whisper her name, because Isla may be gone. But her march never ended. Months passed. Spring turned to summer. The rain softened. The trees near St. Anne's Cemetery grew heavy with green. But in the Bennett home, one corner of the living room remained unchanged. On the mantelpiece, in a glass dome, sat Isla's tiny guardsman, his red wool coat still bright, his black felt bearskin still tall. He stood watch now, not over a palace or a parade, but over the room where laughter sometimes returned and grief came in waves. Visitors asked about it. Rachel always answered the same way. He protects us now, like she said he would. At Windsor Guard headquarters, the letter Isla had written hung at full eye level in the guardroom, framed, untouched, unquestioned. It wasn't decoration, it was ritual. Every recruit passed beneath it during their first week. Some read it once. Others memorized every word. At the bottom of the frame, a small plaque read, Isla Bennett, Honorary Guard. She reminded us who we really protect. It wasn't protocol, it wasn't policy, but it was truth. Captain Ilara Wynne visited the letter every Sunday morning before drill inspections, not because she had to, but because something in her wouldn't let her walk past without remembering. Guardsman called her. He carried Isla's photograph tucked into the inner pocket of his ceremonial tunic. Folded, worn, but never creased. He never told anyone. He didn't need to. One day, during a changing of the guard rehearsal, a junior soldier asked why Calder saluted slightly slower than the rest. His hand held a second longer in the air. Calder said nothing, just smiled faintly, but Captain Wynne, standing nearby, answered for him. Because for some people, she said, you never lower the salute. As for Trooper Mason Gray, he returned to cavalry duties with Titan, his horse now famously spoiled with carrots and apples from visitors who'd heard the story. At night, Gray sometimes looked toward the sky and murmured, she'd have made one hell of a soldier. Back at home, Rachel once found another note, hidden inside Isla's old sketchbook. Just 4 lines, written in purple ink. Soldiers don't just guard castles, they guard hearts. And sometimes they find the ones who need guarding most. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but Rachel knew exactly who it was meant for, because somewhere across London, 3 soldiers still marched, still saluted, still wore red and gold and steel, but they walked differently now. Softer. More certain. As if the little girl they'd once visited hadn't disappeared, but was still walking with them. Not behind, not above, but right beside them, as every good soldier should. This story wasn't just about uniforms or ceremony. It was about seeing someone who needed to be seen, and the quiet power of showing up when it matters most. Have you ever witnessed a moment where kindness broke the rules for all the right reasons? Or has someone ever protected you in a way you didn't expect? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share how this story made you feel, or tell us about a time when someone became your unexpected guardian. Your words might remind someone else that they're not alone.